When humanity finally received confirmation that we weren't alone in the universe, it wasn't through the detection of radio signals or a mysterious monolith on the moon. No, it was through what could only be described as the galactic equivalent of someone accidentally pocket-dialing Earth. The Galactic Federation, a collective of approximately 3,000 sentient species, had been aware of Earth for centuries, but had classified it as mostly harmless, definitely not ready. That changed when a junior communications officer aboard the Federation flagship mistook Earth for Earth, a well-established Federation trading post. The resulting signal was picked up by a 16-year-old kid in Nebraska who was trying to hack into his neighbor's Wi-Fi. 3 months, 17 emergency diplomatic meetings, and one hastily assembled Global Governance Council later, humanity was officially welcomed into the galactic community with all the enthusiasm of inviting a toddler with sticky hands to a fancy dinner party. The Federation immediately established a cultural exchange program, believing somewhat optimistically that understanding was the key to integration. After all, what could go wrong with introducing thousands of alien species to the quirks of human behavior? Commander Jack Novak never asked for this assignment. A former Navy SEAL turned diplomat, Jack had the dubious honor of being appointed as Earth's first cultural ambassador, but primarily because he was the only high-ranking official who didn't throw up during zero-gravity training. Jack was pragmatic, perpetually exhausted, and possessed a dry sense of humor that most aliens mistook for a malfunctioning translation device. His counterpart was Krell, the Federation's cultural attaché. Krell resembled what might happen if an octopus and a giraffe had a baby that was then stretched through a taffy machine. His species, the Voraxians, prided themselves on being meticulous, literal, and completely devoid of sarcasm, a trait that would prove problematic in the months to come. Commander Novak, Krell said during their first meeting, his 7 eyes blinking in an unsettling rhythm, "I am most enthusiastic about documenting human cultural expressions. Your species has a fascinating approach to communication." Jack, nursing his 3rd coffee of the day, nodded. "Just wait until you hear about puns." "What are puns?" "They're like jokes, but worse." Krell made a notation on his tablet. "Worse jokes. Most intriguing. Humans intentionally create inferior humor. This must be documented." And that was how the great cultural misunderstanding began, not with malice or hostility, but with a well-intentioned alien taking everything a sarcastic human said at face value. 3 weeks into the cultural exchange program, Krell had compiled an impressive database of human idioms, metaphors, and expressions. He approached each one with the determined enthusiasm of a scholar discovering ancient texts, meticulously categorizing them by region, usage, and what he called their logic quotient, a metric that frequently hovered near 0. One particular expression caught Krell's attention during a routine tour of the newly established human embassy on Nexus Station, the Federation's massive space hub. Jack was showing him the environmental controls when the system glitched, causing all the lights to flicker ominously. "Should we call maintenance?" Krell asked, his skin shifting to an anxious purple. Jack shrugged. "Nah, I'll just hit the reset button. What's the worst that could happen?" The moment those words left Jack's mouth, Krell froze. His 7 eyes widened simultaneously, a sight Jack would later describe as watching a horrified constellation form, and he immediately pulled out his tablet, fingers flying across the screen. This phrase, "what's the worst that could happen?" It is a philosophical inquiry of profound depth, Krell said reverently. A methodology for risk assessment through hypothetical negative outcome projection. "It's just an expression, Krell." "No, Commander. This is revolutionary. Our scientists have long struggled with comprehensive risk analysis models. But humans, you have built it into your very language. A simple question that forces one to confront the ultimate negative consequence of any action." That's not really what. But it was too late. Krell had already transmitted the phrase to the Federation's Scientific Council, along with his rather generous interpretation of its significance. Within days, the expression had spread throughout Federation space. Jack began hearing it in the diplomatic chambers, research labs, and even in the station's food courts. What concerned him most wasn't the popularity of the phrase, but how aliens were using it not as the rhetorical dismissal of risk that humans intended, but as a serious methodological question demanding thorough investigation. Krell appeared in Jack's office one morning, practically vibrating with excitement. "Commander, the Science Council has created an entire research division dedicated to your phrase. They're calling it the Worst-Case Scenario Department." That sounds concerning. On the contrary, it's brilliant. They're systematically testing the worst possible outcomes for everyday activities. They've already documented 712 ways that simple food preparation can lead to catastrophic outcomes. Jack blinked. That doesn't sound healthy. Several test subjects would agree with you, Krell said, his tone completely serious. They're currently regenerating in medical pods. Wait, what? Nothing to worry about. The probability calculation team simply underestimated the explosive potential of what you call microwave popcorn. Did you know that under certain conditions, those kernels can reach velocities sufficient to penetrate 3 decks of hull plating? Jack pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling the first twinges of a headache that would soon become his constant companion. Krell, when humans ask what's the worst that could happen, we're not actually requesting information. Exactly. That's what makes it so brilliant. You already know the answer but ask anyway, forcing your brain to confront and accept the risk. Psychological preparation through verbalized risk assessment. As Krell continued expounding on the alleged genius of this human phrase, Jack looked out his office window at the vast expanse of space beyond. Somewhere out there, Federation scientists were taking a throwaway human expression and turning it into methodology. For the first time since becoming Earth's cultural ambassador, Jack felt a twinge of genuine concern. What's the worst that could happen? As it turned out, they were all about to find out. The first major incident occurred approximately 6 standard Federation weeks after Krell's discovery of the phrase. Jack was in the middle of explaining why humans say break a leg. As a good luck sentiment, a concept that had several Ursivorian delegates clutching their multiple knee joints in horror when his communication device erupted with emergency alerts. Commander Novak. The holographic projection of Admiral Zorn, head of Federation security, appeared before him. The Admiral's typically blue scales had paled to a concerned lavender. Report to Laboratory Complex Delta immediately. 20 minutes later, Jack stood before what used to be Laboratory Complex Delta, but now resembled an abstract art installation made of twisted metal and gently floating debris. The containment field around it shimmered with warning lights. What happened? He asked a nearby security officer. A scientist named Vexa was conducting an experiment, the officer replied. Something about human conceptual frameworks. Jack's stomach dropped. Let me guess, she asked, what's the worst that could happen? The officer nodded grimly. How did you know? Before Jack could answer, a small figure bounded toward him with alarming enthusiasm given the surrounding destruction. The creature resembled a cross between a kangaroo and a fennec fox, with enormous ears that twitched excitedly and a lab coat that had clearly been through some trauma. Commander Novak. I'm Vexa, Xenobiological Research Lead. Are you here to assist with the follow-up test? I've made some adjustments to the containment field that should prevent dimensional bleeding this time. Jack stared at her. Dimensional bleeding. Yes, fascinating result, really. I was testing the human philosophical construct of what's the worst that could happen on a new fusion reactor design. The algorithm projected 17 catastrophic outcomes. But we discovered an 18th. The reactor didn't explode, it imploded into a temporary microdimension that then leaked back into our reality. We've never seen anything like it. Vex's ears wiggled with what Jack recognized as scientific delight. The probability calculators gave it a 0.0000003% chance of occurring, which technically makes it the worst possible outcome. thus confirming the human methodology's effectiveness. Jack looked from the enthusiastic scientist to the floating debris field that used to be a multi-billion credit research facility. Vexa, that phrase isn't meant to be taken literally. It's just something humans say when we're about to do something potentially unwise but are choosing to ignore the consequences. Vexa's ears drooped slightly. That can't be right. The Federation Science Council has launched 27 research initiatives based on this methodology. 27. Maybe. Yes, and they're all showing remarkable results in identifying previously unconsidered catastrophic outcomes. The casualty rate is much lower than expected too, only 3.4% fatalities and 12% major injuries. Jack's security communicator chirped, rescuing him from having to process the casualty statistics. Admiral Zorn's voice came through. Novak, the Federation Council is convening an emergency session regarding this incident. Your presence is required immediately. 3 hours later, Jack found himself standing before the assembled council representatives from the 12 oldest species in the Federation, trying to explain the nuances of human rhetorical questions to beings who took everything literally. So when humans ask this question, they don't actually want to know the worst outcome. Asked Counselor Thrix, a crystalline entity who communicated through light pulses. Correct. It's like saying it'll be fine even when we suspect it probably won't be. Deliberate self-deception? Another counselor rumbled. More like optimistic negligence. The council chambers erupted in multilingual murmurs. Finally, the head counselor, a gaseous entity contained in an ornate floating sphere, moved forward. Commander Novak, due to the incident at Laboratory Complex Delta, we are implementing immediate restrictions on human linguistic expressions until proper safety protocols can be established. Furthermore, you will be assigned to work with the worst-case scenario department to prevent further misapplications. And that was how Jack Novak, the man who once jumped out of spaceships for a living, found himself assigned to linguistic damage control, a job that would prove far more dangerous than any combat mission he'd ever undertaken. Despite Jack's best efforts, the phrase, "What's the worst that could happen?" had achieved something akin to viral meme status across the Federation. It wasn't just scientists anymore. Politicians, business leaders, and even children on hundreds of worlds had adopted the expression, each with their own interpretation of its meaning. On Proxima Centauri's third moon, a Federation governor used the phrase before implementing a new traffic system, resulting in what locals now called the Great Hover Car Stack-Up, a three-dimensional traffic jam so complex that mathematicians were studying it as a new form of spatial topology. In the Orion Trading Hub, a merchant asked the question before mixing two completely benign cleaning chemicals, creating a compound that made everything in a 50-meter radius permanently sticky. 3 weeks later, rescue workers were still trying to unstick various beings from walls, ceilings, and each other. But these were minor compared to what happened in the Sirius system, where an enthusiastic terraforming team had decided to apply the worst-case methodology to planetary engineering. They were now proud creators of the galaxy's first naturally occurring inside-out planet, where the core was somehow on the outside and the atmosphere was on the inside. Federation physicists were still trying to figure out how they'd managed it. Jack's office had become command central for what he privately called Operation. Human idioms are not actually instructions. Krell was attempting to help, in his own literal-minded way, by creating a comprehensive database of every reported incident. "The pattern is fascinating, Commander," Krell said one morning, his skin a thoughtful shade of blue. "The chaos caused by this phrase appears to grow exponentially with the technological sophistication of the species using it." Jack, who hadn't slept in approximately 36 hours, grunted from behind a mountain of incident reports. "That's because more advanced technology means bigger booms when things go wrong." Precisely. The Federation's most advanced species are causing the most spectacular failures. It's as if the phrase has unlocked some previously untapped potential for creative disaster. Before Jack could respond, His door slid open with an urgent hiss. A Federation security detail entered, followed by an imposing figure that Jack recognized immediately, Admiral Gornax, head of Federation military operations, a notorious human skeptic. Admiral Gornax resembled a cross between a bear and a battleship, massive, armored, and perpetually looking like he wanted to fire his main cannons at something. His species had evolved on a world with 32 times Earth's gravity, giving him both incredible physical density and an equally dense disposition. "Commander Novak," Gornax rumbled, his voice like boulders grinding together. "Your human linguistic weapon has compromised Federation security." Jack stood, trying not to look intimidated. "It's not a weapon, Admiral. It's just a saying that's been misinterpreted. Tell that to the 7th Fleet. One of your human exchange officers used this phrase before a routine warp drill. The entire fleet is now 3 weeks in the past and communicating with us exclusively through temporal echoes." Jack winced. "That's unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" The Federation's most advanced warships are stuck in a temporal loop where they experience Tuesdays over and over again. Do you have any idea how much paperwork that generates? Before Jack could respond, his communication panel chimed with the Federation Council's priority signal. The head counselor's spherical form appeared, pulsating with what Jack had learned to recognize as extreme agitation. "Commander Novak, Admiral Gornax, the situation has escalated. 17 major systems are reporting worst-case scenario incidents. The Science Council is calling for expanded testing, while the Security Council is demanding an immediate ban on all human expressions." Gornax's massive form seemed to swell with vindication. "I've been saying this from the beginning. Humans are a chaotic influence on orderly galactic society. Their language is as dangerous as their primitive nuclear weapons." "With all due respect, Admiral," Jack interjected, "this isn't a human problem, it's a translation problem. My species uses figurative language all the time without causing dimensional rifts or time loops. That's what makes it so insidious." Gornax thundered. "You don't even recognize the destructive power of your own words." The head counselor's form pulsed for attention. "Regardless of the cause, we must find a solution. Admiral Gornax has proposed a moratorium on human integration into Federation society until we can fully understand the risks." Jack felt his blood run cold. Being banned from Federation space would set Earth's development back centuries. "That's not necessary. We just need better cultural context in the translation matrices." "Perhaps," the counselor responded, "but the Science Council has made a compelling proposal. They believe that if we conduct one final, controlled worst-case scenario test, we can develop comprehensive safety protocols for human linguistic integration." "What kind of test?" Jack asked, already dreading the answer. "They wish to apply the methodology to the Federation's newest technology, the quantum probability engine." Even Gornax looked concerned at this. "Counselor, that technology is still experimental." "Precisely why the Science Council believes it's the perfect test subject. If we can understand the worst possible outcome of our most advanced technology, we can prepare for anything." As the communication ended, Jack turned to Krell, whose skin had turned a pale, worried white. "Krell, what exactly is the quantum probability engine?" "A device that manipulates probability fields," Krell explained quietly. "Theoretically, it could alter the statistical likelihood of any event." "And what's the worst that could happen if something goes wrong with it?" Krell's entire body shuddered. "That, Commander, is exactly what they intend to find out." The quantum probability engine resembled what might happen if someone gave a mathematical equation physical form. It didn't so much exist as suggest the possibility of existence, a shimmering, ever-shifting construction of light and impossibly thin materials that hurt Jack's eyes when he looked at it directly. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Dr. Pelver, the engine's chief designer, waved what might have been an arm or possibly a tentacle at the device. "The culmination of 3 centuries of probability research." They stood in a massive spherical chamber at the heart of Federation Science Station Alpha, a facility specially constructed in the empty space between solar systems just in case, as Dr. Pelver had ominously explained. Jack, Krell, and a very unenthusiastic Admiral Gornax had arrived just 2 hours before the scheduled test. Their mission was supposedly to observe, but Jack had privately decided that prevent catastrophic disaster was a more accurate job description. "So explain again what this thing does?" Jack asked, eyeing the fluctuating machine warily. "It manipulates probability fields," Dr. Pelver said with the casual air of someone discussing the weather rather than the fundamental forces of reality. "In simple terms, it can make unlikely events more likely, and likely events less likely." "Like making it more probable that I'll win the lottery?" "Much more profound than that, Commander. It could make it more probable that particles decay in specific patterns, or that quantum fluctuations occur in predictable sequences. It could revolutionize everything from medicine to transportation." "Or weapons," Gornax added grimly. "Well, yes," Dr. Pelver admitted. "The military applications are extensive." Jack exchanged looks with Krell. "And you're going to ask what's the worst that could happen while running this thing?" "Not exactly. We've created an algorithm based on the human philosophical framework. It will systematically test probability shifts that could lead to negative outcomes, allowing us to build safety protocols." "Have you considered," Jack said slowly, "that deliberately seeking out the worst possible outcome for a machine that alters probability might not be the wisest approach?" Dr. Pelver's eye stalks quivered with what might have been indignation. "We're scientists, Commander. We've calculated the risks. So did the team that created an inside-out planet. This is different. We've incorporated safeguards. The testing chamber is isolated from normal space-time. Nothing that happens inside can affect the outside universe." An alarm chimed softly, and Dr. Pelver's assistants began preparing the engine for activation. Krell moved closer to Jack, his voice lowered. "Commander, I've been reviewing the test protocols. There's a significant oversight in their methodology." "Just one." "They're assuming that the worst possible outcome is a technical malfunction or physical disaster." Jack frowned. "What else would it be?" "The worst outcome might be that the device works perfectly but makes the worst possible probability shift." Before Jack could respond, the observation room doors hissed open, and to his surprise, Vexa bounded in, her enormous ears twitching with excitement. "Made it just in time," she announced cheerfully. "Wouldn't miss the ultimate worst-case test for anything." "Vexa," Jack said carefully, "the last time you conducted one of these tests, you created a dimensional rift." "Exactly. And we learned so much from it. That's the beauty of the worst-case methodology, unexpected discoveries." Dr. Pelver announced that the test would commence in 5 minutes. Jack pulled Krell and Vexa into a corner, speaking urgently. "We need to stop this test. Every instinct I have is screaming that this is a terrible idea." Gornax, overhearing, moved his massive form toward them. "For once, human, we are in agreement. This test is too dangerous." Vexa's ears drooped. "But the potential knowledge." "Won't matter if we break reality," Jack finished. "Krell, what are our options?" Krell's skin shifted through colors as he thought. "The test requires council authorization. If we could contact them with evidence of danger." "No time," Gornax rumbled. "Look." On the main screen, the countdown had accelerated. Dr. Pelver was inputting final commands with alarming speed. "Something's wrong," Jack said. "Pelver's rushing the procedure." Krell's skin turned alarm red. "The energy readings are far beyond test parameters." Jack didn't wait. He sprinted toward the control console, Gornax right behind him. The Admiral's massive form was surprisingly fast when motivated by imminent catastrophe. "Pelver," "Shut it down," Jack shouted. The scientist's eye stalk swiveled toward them, quivering with what Jack now recognized as fanatical excitement rather than indignation. "Don't you understand? We're making history. The ultimate test, not just asking what's the worst that could happen, but making it happen." Gornax reached the console first, his massive fist coming down on the emergency shutdown. The controls sparked and fizzled, but the engine continued its acceleration. "Manual override failed," Gornax growled. Jack turned to Krell and Vexa. "Options?" Vexa's ears were fully erect with alarm. "The quantum field is already expanding. If it reaches critical resonance..." "Less science, more solutions," Jack snapped. Krell's fingers flew across a secondary terminal. "If we invert the probability matrix, we might be able to..." A blinding flash interrupted him as the engine reached full power. The air in the chamber seemed to thicken, time stretching like taffy. Jack felt reality itself shudder around them. And in that moment, facing what might literally be the worst thing that could happen, Commander Jack Novak did what humans do best: he improvised. What happened next would later be recorded in Federation archives as the Novak paradox. As the quantum probability engine reached critical resonance, Jack did something that no one, not even the engine itself, could have predicted. He asked another question. "What's the best that could happen?" Jack shouted directly into the engine's input array. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The engine, programmed to calculate worst-case scenarios, suddenly received a logical contradiction that its quantum processors couldn't resolve. The probability field, which had been expanding toward certain catastrophe, hesitated like a wave that couldn't decide which direction to break. In that moment of computational confusion, Krell managed to access the engine's core programming. With Vexa providing real-time calculations and Gornax physically restraining Dr. Pelver, who was still insisting that scientific progress required occasional existential risks, they managed to initiate a controlled shutdown sequence. 47 tense seconds later, the engine powered down. The shimmering quantum field collapsed back into itself with a sound like reality sighing in relief. The aftermath was surprisingly anticlimactic. No one died. The universe didn't end. The worst damage was to Dr. Pelver's professional reputation and the observation room floor, which now inexplicably had the consistency of marshmallow fluff. 2 days later, Jack stood before the Federation Council, delivering what might be the most important speech of his diplomatic career. Members of the Council, the incident with the quantum probability engine demonstrates not a flaw in human expression, but in cross-species translation. When humans ask what's the worst that could happen, we're not advocating for worst-case analysis, we're actually employing a rhetorical device called tempting fate. The council chambers remained silent as Jack continued. In human culture, this phrase is often used ironically, just before something goes terribly wrong. It's less a methodology and more a superstition. By naming the possibility of disaster, we're actually hoping to avoid it. Counselor Thrix's crystalline form pulsed skeptically. Yet the scientific applications have yielded valuable data. True, Jack acknowledged. But at what cost? 17 major incidents, including a time-displaced fleet and an inside-out planet. The phrase works differently in our cultural context than in yours. After hours of deliberation, the Council reached a decision. They would not ban humans from Federation space, a ruling that caused Admiral Gornax to emit a sound like grinding gears, but would instead implement a new galactic regulation that the human phrases require context protocol. Under this protocol, all human expressions would be accompanied by cultural context tags and translation matrices. Phrases like "what's the worst that could happen" would carry warning labels and usage recommendations. Additionally, a new department would be created, the Idiomatic Safety Commission, co-chaired by representatives from Earth and the Federation. Jack immediately nominated Krell and Vexa for the alien contingent, reasoning that those who understood the danger best were most qualified to prevent future incidents. 1 month later, Jack stood in his office, looking out at the stars. The new protocol was working better than expected. Incidents had dropped by 94%, and Federation scientists had actually developed useful applications for controlled worst-case analysis conducted under strict safety guidelines. Krell entered, his skin a calm blue. "Commander, the new translation matrices have been deployed across all Federation systems. Any issues?" "Minor ones. Some species are still struggling with the concept of knock on wood." Jack laughed. "One thing at a time, Krell." The door chimed again, and Admiral Gornax's massive form filled the doorway. His expression was as close to pleasant as his species could manage, which still looked vaguely like he was contemplating destruction. "Commander Novak," he rumbled, "the Security Council has reviewed your actions during the engine incident. Your quick thinking prevented what could have been a multidimensional catastrophe." Jack nodded. "Just doing my job, Admiral." "Nevertheless, your best-case intervention technique has been adopted into Federation emergency protocols." There was almost a hint of respect in the Admiral's gravelly voice. "It seems humans have some wisdom after all, even if it's accidental." As Gornax departed, Krell turned to Jack. "There's one more thing you should know. The phrase has taken on new meaning across the Federation. When someone says, 'What's the worst that could happen now?' it's usually followed by immediate panic and emergency protocols." "You're kidding." "Not at all. It's become a recognized danger signal." In fact, Krell's communication device chimed with an incoming message. He checked it, and his skin paled rapidly. "What is it?" Jack asked. "Vexa has started a new research project. She just sent a message asking for approval to test another human expression." "Which one?" "Something called Hold My Beer." Jack closed his eyes and took a very, very deep breath. It seemed their work was just beginning,